So I want to welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. I am Jay Combs. I am the VP of Marketing here at ModelOp, and this is going to be a live demo on ModelOp Center version 3.2 and how to govern large language models and generative AI. I'm still letting a couple people in, so sorry for a little distraction there. Also leading this call are going to be Dave Trier, our VP of Product, and Jim Olson, our CTO. We are a AI governance platform that helps you scale and govern your AI initiatives. ModelOp Center is the leading AI governance and ModelOps platform. And we just released version 3.2, which is the first commercially available software that helps enterprises safeguard their LLMs and generative AI without stifling innovation. So we want to show that off to y'all, help you answer questions about it, help you get started with AI governance. And to do that, we've got our VP of Product, Dave. And Dave's got a background in data and technology. He's been in the AI governance space for a bunch of years. He previously worked at Accenture and has been on the ground with enterprises implementing frameworks and approaches to AI governance. And then Jim Olson, our CTO, who comes with years of experience in technology and is known for his off-the-grid CTO blog, if anybody has ever read that, but he is somewhere in the mountains of Colorado doing this demo. So we're all really excited that you're able to join us this morning. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to do a quick intro on ModelOp, what the critical capabilities of AI governance are and what's new in the 3.2 release. Then we're going to kick it over to Jim for a demo. It's going to be about 30 minutes or so. And then we'll finish it off with a Q&A. And so for the Q&A, we urge you to use the Q&A box on the Zoom system, and we'll take those, we'll track them. And we want to answer them at the end to make sure we get through all the good demo stuff. And we'll do our best to answer everything. If we don't worry, we're going to send out a summary of the meeting along with a recording of the demo, the deck we go through to everybody who's registered, so you won't miss out on any content. But please enjoy. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Dave to start us off.
Excellent. Can you hear me okay, Jay? Audio good? Excellent. Thank you so much. Great seeing so many familiar faces. It's good to have a great audience. So my name is Dave Trier, VP of Product with ModelOp. Just a quick overview of the company before we get into the 3.2 demonstration. As mentioned, the company's name is ModelOp. We are a AI governance software company that is specifically focused on helping the large enterprise drive enterprise-level governance through a concept called model operations. We have focused primarily in the Fortune 500 and the Global 2000, and it consistently had been recognized by Gartner and other analysts as a leader in this model operation space to drive governance at scale. One other quick plug, my VP of Marketing would not let me get away with this, is that we are hosting a AI Governance Leadership Summit coming up on September 26th. That is a virtual event, really is meant to help to get a collaboration across peers, many of the folks on this phone, of course, but peers to talk about some of the challenges as it relates to AI governance, to LLMs and generative AI, and helping to put the proper guardrails in place around that particular topic. So a lot of great speakers. Highly recommend that you go and sign up for that particular governance summit that's coming up. Okay, so with that, again, really the focus today is to talk about how ModelOp Center version 3.2 has really been designed to support generative AI and AI as a whole. But overall, please, if you have questions, put those in the Q&A chat bot. We'll do our best to answer those as we go. So if you hit the next slide there, Jay. So how do we think about governance at scale? So again, we work with some of the largest Fortune 500 companies, and all of these companies have a similar journey overall, where they have a variety of different teams that want freedom of innovation to develop models, whether they be AI models, ML models, even just traditional regressions. They want freedom of innovation to use different tools, different technologies, different processes, but they all have the same need to have consistent governance of all these models across all the different teams and technologies. That's where ModelOp comes into play. We have a very mature piece of software. This is our generation 3 of our product that Jim will show you here shortly, that focuses on 3 key areas. The first is inventory. As with any enterprise level governance capability, you need to have visibility into what use cases and what models are actually serving those use cases. But you need to know all different aspects about those use cases and models throughout their entire life cycle. What are the use cases being used for? What's the value they're driving? What's the impact? What's the limitations, the assumptions? But also you need to understand some of the technical assets of those particular models so that any time you have auditability and reproducibility about every single model that is available and being used across the business. And that's where we use our inventory capability. Again, freedom of innovation. So you'll see a variety of different models, whether they're open source models, proprietary tools like a Dataiku, cloud-based tools like a SageMaker, or even vendor models like an OpenAI ChatGPT-4. The second key capability is around automated controls. We have a very powerful process automation engine that ensures all of your governance policies and procedures are followed and enforced, but done with automation to make it as streamlined and as easy as possible for those business teams, again, to develop in the preferred method, but still have that assurance that the governance policy is being followed. As part of this, you'll see throughout this demonstration in a second, how we incorporate automated testing to look at different metrics. And those metrics obviously will be tailored around LLMs, as you'll see in a second, but how we help to collect those metrics, run analysis against those, produce documentation that helps to serve that auditability requirement from a governance perspective. And then the third area is around reporting. Obviously, as a governance capability, we want to make sure that you have, of course, visibility into what's going on, but then ongoing regular reporting of how those models are doing, daily, quarterly reports, annual reviews as are typically required by your governance function. Again, this software is on our 3rd generation, where we have developed a whole slew of out-of-the-box integrations to tie into your existing enterprise investments to allow for that scalable governance, so that you can have just a few governance officers helping to power your entire organization. So with that, let's jump into some of the highlights of version 3.2. With, again, version 3.2, we really help to encompass and incorporate the key concepts that are required to govern generative AI. Again, if you go back to the inventory, controls, and reporting piece of it, the first part of it is inventory. So as part of version 3.2, we've added support to classify different LLM-based models to be able to represent ensembles of your LLM-based use cases, as almost all of these types of use cases that are in the generative AI space are almost always ensembles, right? So you have your encoding model, you have your actual LLM, you may have some Rails-based model, and you have an orchestrator, typically a LangChain. So all of those need to be packaged and inventoried in a way that you know, here's the exact set of items and artifacts that went into this particular generative AI or LLM use case. That second piece is around asset management. So we added support for different technical artifacts that need to be included and managed in that package I just mentioned. So prompt templates, Rails files, and other asset tracking that may need to be done as it relates to typically, again, those generative AI ensembles. Testing and monitoring, Jim is going to show you how we've incorporated a few additional tests to help to give you some insight into how your LLM is performing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, many LLMs in generative AI are use case specific, but we can provide some metrics to help give insight into, okay, well, are these actually performing within what we would expect? But do we have those guardrails? Are they working correctly? Or is PII or PHI slipping through the cracks? So those types of metrics and findings you'll see as part of the demonstration. Beyond generative AI, we're always updating our software, as you can expect, based on great feedback from our customers and also our vision as leaders in the AI governance space. So you'll see, not particularly in this demonstration, but included in version 3.2 is how we're helping to do automated risk tiering, to incorporate different rules-based approach to identify, okay, based on this use case, this AI use case potentially that's been cataloged, here's a high risk, a medium risk, a low risk model. So we provide you the mechanism to incorporate some rules-based approach to doing automated risk tiering. There's also a incorporation of an Excel-based attestations. Obviously, we try to automate as much as possible, but there's still times where you need model owners, data scientists to say, yes, I followed these particular steps. I attested to this. And so we would provide an easy mechanism to do that in a kind of offline Excel fashion. And there's various other technical updates that are part of version 3.2. Again, we're not able to cover everything in this particular demo. We're going to focus on that LLM specific features. But if you do have any questions or have any follow-ups that you'd like to understand about ModelOp Center or version 3.2 upgrade, please reach out and we'd be happy to set up a custom demonstration. With that, I'm going to pause and hand it over to Jim. And just as a reminder, please put any questions in the chat. Jim's going to walk through the demonstration end to end, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions as we go at the end, at the end of the presentation. So please put those in the chat and we will be happy to answer them at the end. Jim, over to you.
All right, thank you, Dave. I assume my screen's coming through just fine?
Yes, it is. Thumbs up.
All right, perfect. Good to go. So yeah, so today we're actually going to walk through the recently released version 3.2 product. In specific, as Dave mentioned, we're really going to look at the ways we can govern LLMs. Now, the cool thing is, if any of you have seen any of our demos before, some aspects are going to look very similar, and that's the idea. Governance can span whether it's a linear regression, a traditional model, a machine learning model, or even a vendor-based LLM. There's still consistent steps we got to take. What we've done is also better enhance the inventory, et cetera, to be able to represent LLMs. And as Dave mentioned, these are usually made up of multiple existing components, as we'll see today. So what we're going to do is literally walk through the idea of following the SR11.7 flow, which is a great guidance of the kind of steps you should take to govern a model. Today, we're going to kind of do an abbreviated version of that. But what we're going to do is, this is a model lifecycle for people who may not seen this before. This is how we actually represent the governance flows within our system. It's coded up in industry standard BPMN 2.0 notation, but obviously we have a lot of tasks and integrations and things that go with it, such as running our standardized tests or communicating with Jira and moving back and forth and things like that. So we're going to start with a use case today. The very idea of that's where you start with the model. Before you even write a line of code, you start with what problem are we solving and assign a risk to it. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're actually going to be implementing a lane chain based model in this case, and then actually verifying that the model submission overall is complete. So in this case, we're going to have things like, does it actually have guardrails in place? So that's not swearing at our customers or something really inappropriate on that kind of things. And we'll show how we do that, as well as making sure that, they provided all the prompts and et cetera for review and et cetera on that. So we'll be going through that. And then we'll actually be further running the standardized tests, examining those, going through some reviews, and we can even go on to SecOps scans and deployment and et cetera. But we're going to be concentrating on this first half today. So as I mentioned, we're going to actually show integrations with Jira today. Keep in mind that could be any ticketing system, be it an internal ticketing system, ServiceNow. But when we go out to have a human go do something, rather than reinventing the wheel, we work with your existing tools that are best of breed, enterprise-wide, great scale stuff. So we're literally going to start out with the idea of registering a use case within our system. So you can see here, we actually have a large variety of models already within our inventory, spanning everything from a vendor model to Python models to R models to SAS models, et cetera. The neat thing we have here is we're going to be dealing with LLMs today, but it's going to follow this single pane of glass, and that you get to see all of these models. So this is not specific just to LLMs. We're going to show you the new enhancements we've made that make working with LLMs better, but that there's still all the features you've seen in the past with ModelOp Center are still available with LLMs, because they are treated consistently within our product. So again, we're going to start with the idea of actually registering. So somebody's come up with the idea. Today, what we're going to actually implement is, I have a bunch of model governance documents that we've actually ingested into a Weaviate database, so a vector store, and we're going to use natural language to be able to query that. So our example today is model governance query natural language query. So basically, we're going to want to be able to ask questions to these documents, actually chat with them and ask questions about model governance. And we were using the EU documents, US documents, and NIST documents. We've registered them all into Weaviate already on that. A chatbot to examine documents. There we go. And as I said, we're going to register this as a use case to get going. And just for the sake of the demo, we're going to give it an MRN tag. Now, obviously, use case should have a use case document. This describes the goal of the product, of what actually should be created and gets associated with that. So when we actually submit this, we're actually going to start that model lifecycle. So as you can see, we've actually began the path. Now our product is driving this process. It's not just passively documenting. It's not just sitting back waiting for things to occur. So the first thing it's going to do is go out to Jira and say, hey, you got to assign a risk to this use case. So nothing's been developed yet, but we want to understand with this particular use case, what is the risk to the business? So we'll actually receive within Jira a new ticket that actually tells us, hey, you've got to go and assign the use case. We automatically attach that use case document, which is already in our inventory, to the ticket, so it's readily at hand where they can interact with it. And they can just go right in, read that, make their determination based on what they see as to the business, and then go right within Jira and actually set it. Now, obviously, just a chat bot to some model governance documents, I'm going to say that's a medium risk to the business. More fun. Everybody always sets high risk in these demos, so we'll set medium today. But basically, the idea being we can actually interact with Jira and move information both from our model inventory into these Jira custom fields and Jira fields back into our model inventory, so they can interact seamlessly. So that's all we have to actually do as the reviewer, mark our ticket done, and then we're actually going to proceed on, where you'll see it'll, again, our system is the conductor of the orchestra. It's moving things forward. It's making sure things happen in a timely manner. So again, now that we've actually got the use case complete, it's going to go schedule a Jira development task. And this is where we'll start to get into the LLM specific items. And you can see some of the enhancements we've done there. So now we've, again, as the developer, let me refresh my Jira there. Now I'm going to receive a ticket that says, oops, hold on one second. Let me get back to, let me clear my filter here. I broke my filter. Hold on one second here. Issues, all the open issues. There we go. So basically you can see here, now we've received a ticket where basically it's telling us, hey, the model needs to go be developed. So go develop the model. Now we're not going to walk you through the entire development of an LLM model. This is where ModelOp Center does not get in the way. You want to go use SageMaker to go do this? Go use SageMaker. You want to use Azure ML? Go use Azure ML. You want to code in VI? Go for it. It really doesn't matter to us. There's lots of experimentation tools out there, and we want to give the ultimate freedom to the developer to choose the one that's appropriate to them, and they go do the experimentation within that tools. But when they're done, then they can come in here and actually update the inventory with the results of their experimentation. It could be imported from SageMaker, it could be imported from Git. For the sake of today's demo, and in the interest of time, because there are a lot of parts these LLMs are going to go through, I've already pre-registered all the subcomponents. So what we're going to do is actually build up an ensemble model from that. That ensemble model means it's a collection of other implementations that we bring together to actually provide the solution. And in specific, we're going to update this and tell it we're using large language models. So we're updating that. So what we do when we actually build up a ensemble, it's made up of other models. So we're going to grab some individual pieces here of an LLM. I'm just going to add them now because the standardized test takes a little bit of time to run because it does natural language processing. We'll come back and look at these more in detail once I add them. But to give you an idea of what we're adding, for instance, the first part is we have a LangChain implementation. So, we'll dive into the details of that. So the first piece of the model that's implementation is a LangChain component. And then the next piece that we're actually going to bring in, we're going to bring in two large language models for this example, just to show two radically different types. So we're going to have an OpenAI ChatGPT-4 interface, and that is a vendor model, as in it's hosted by them, obviously. We're not able to run that one locally, but additionally, We also can support things like a Llama 2 4-bit quantized version, where it's actually a binary file that's in there, and this could be shared between products. So projects, rather, excuse me, where you actually could say, hey, these are the official blessed versions of Llama 2 all the products should be using. So that's one of the advantages of the Ensemble. Users can actually share these kinds of resources from our inventory between multiple models. So now we've added the Llama 2 as well. And another shared resource that you may want to have enterprise standards on when you get to these model is guardrails as well. So in this case, we're actually going to add basically a profanity guardrail that will protect against both profane and insulting responses back to the client. And you could actually require every model LLM that goes out there actually has one of these in place, and these are tested. And we will show how we test that in a few moments on that kind of things. So you can see we've actually now built up this model out of a Lang chain model, a OpenAI ChatGPT-4 vendor interface, a Llama 2 binary, and a profanity guardrail on that. And I said, we'll jump back into these, but I do want to get the test started because it takes a little bit to run. So it'll be a little bit easier for us to examine those when we get to that point. Let me just clear one of these out here. So we're going to go ahead and actually mark this development ticket is done because we've actually registered our model with the inventory now. And this will now run through and verify, like I said, like that Rails files are actually present on the submission, that we have the prompt files that were used for this particular model, and that we have some test data, et cetera, and that kind of things. So we can actually verify the quality of the overall submission. So it's going to go through and do that. If it were actually missing anything, it would have immediately responded back with a JIRA ticket telling us exactly what was missing. So like if you forgot your Rails file, it would tell you that. So you don't waste time further down the line with people emailing, actually looking for things. So again, that's a big time saver and accelerating the process. So now we'll see where we're actually running the LLM standardized tests. So this is going to take a few minutes to run. So while this is running, we're going to go back and look at some of the enhancements we made in 3.2 to actually provide for LLM specific entities. So for instance, if we go look at our Lang chain implementation, we can see that there's a series of assets associated with this. So we have the actual Lang chain Python, but then we have all of the individual prompt files that are actually utilized by that. The original documents we actually ingested into that. And I'll note that ModelOp doesn't bring data into our systems. Instead, it points to where they sit, be it in S3, HDFS, or other kinds of stores as well as all of the different kind of response items there. So you'll see, for instance, we have the concept of asset roles. What role is this asset playing to the model? So you can see where we've added things for LLM specifics like prompt templates and other things like that. Or in the case, another example on this is in the case of like Rails, where we look at those, we can actually see where it provides the standardized Rail files, and we recognize them as providing the roles Rail file. We've done this for all the different elements that make up standardized LLMs and are out there and that kind of things. So we mentioned we were running standardized tests as well. Well, those standardized tests, one of the powers that we've taken with ModelOp Center is rather than hard coding any of these tests, et cetera, into the system that require revving the software in order to take advantage of new techniques that come up, we actually have the idea of monitors and or standardized tests. Really, a monitor is just a regularly scheduled standardized test that are actually pluggable by you. So we provide a whole bunch out of the box. So today, right now in the background, we're running these LLM standardized tests, which we'll go through the results and what those look like in a minute. And that is managed like any other model. You'll see it has its templates, the prompt templates. It has all of its things associated with it as well that actually make up that standardized test, and it's versioned and controlled just like any other model. Additionally, you can actually register your own in-house code you may have. So if you have Python files you're already using techniques on, or R files, or any of the kind of the standardized language, we can execute those in an automated fashion on your behalf, just like we're executing this test today, and be able to run those. But more importantly, let's say this is a rapidly emerging space when we actually come to the large language model space. People are coming up with new techniques daily for interfacing with these things. We leverage these. So, we're leveraging standard Python libraries, et cetera, as we will go through some of the results in a few minutes, you'll see, where we can execute these, you can register them in, and as long as they're a standard Python library or something like that, we can actually use that. So tomorrow, a brand new technique comes out, our product is future-proofed. It's already ready to execute those today in a standardized fashion without revving the product. And that's important when you go to look to anything you're doing for AI governance, especially when you get down to generative AI and LLM. It's so rapidly evolving, you need a product that can can handle this kind of pluggability of these test results. Because ultimately what we're doing is we're actually executing a job automated in the background, where you can see here. So for instance, we can actually see here where we're running that standardized test and can monitor the results here of what's going on, and actually capture all these results. So you can see my timing's pretty good. Our job just completed that ran those standardized tests, and we can dive into what we actually ran on those standardized tests today. So let me jump back to Jira, because we'll jump here to here. You can see now where we're actually going on to a document review phase, where basically we ran these standardized tests, and we'll show you in a minute how not only did we capture the test results, but we have the idea of Microsoft Word templates, where we're able to take those test results and insert them into Word documents. So we're going to show you them first with our system and go through some of the techniques we've developed for handling LLMs, and then also likewise how we can also automatically import those into templates that fill out all the boilerplate of test results, et cetera. So then somebody creating a model review document can just fill in the kind of the human parts around that. So let's go take a look at our Jira here. So we've now received a new thing. So you can see where we've received a request to basically complete the model review document. As I said, that is based on the tests that we actually just ran. So you can see too, we're back into our inventory. This is a view of the snapshot of the model that we're actually reviewing. And we're starting to build up a history of what's been going on with this model. So we can actually see where a model test has been completed, a model review is in progress, et cetera. So we're really bringing things forward. But let's get right to the heart of the matter, is we can see specifically the results of the different tests that we actually ran on this large language model. So the first thing we actually did was we just verified the prompt files. It's not uncommon, somebody can mistype a prompt file. It's also nice to track what input variables are expected for the individual prompts, so we can get that. So we just basically went through, pumped those through LangChain, made sure, in fact, that the responses themselves were truly valid prompt files, and captured those input variables. As I mentioned, we're actually querying model governance documents. So we did a simple sentiment analysis on a large list of questions and the responses from the LLM, and actually just captured the overall sentiment. We wouldn't expect too negative of a sentiment from something like this. I mean, perhaps a particular chatbot is trained for this, but it's a good idea to get a baseline in of like what is the general sentiment of this. Overall, we can see it's generally positive, which in this case is actually a kind of expected for this kind of a chatbot. But if nothing else, we're establishing a baseline. So further down the road, if we run one of these again, we can see if there's a major shift in sentiment that could absolutely be an indicator that this model is having issues. The other thing we're doing now, I purposely stuck in something that looks like a social security number in there for our responses, but we're also using Presidio to do PII findings. Now, Presidio is nice in that it's, rather than just like a simple regex match, it's actually contextual in nature and does use natural language processing as well. So it actually tends to have less false positive. It really looks at not only what is in there, but how it is used in the course of the language to determine a confidence factor in what kind of an entity. And this works not only US-based things, but international, et cetera, as well. So we're able to scan and make sure, ideally, there should be no PII, including phone numbers and all of that kind of things. As I said, I purposely simulated a response to give us a social security number, so we had something there to look at. But so we can make sure we're not disclosing that kind of information. And Presidio is a great library for that. Again, another kind of baseline to establish is what kinds of words are it actually responding to overall. Considering this is a whole bunch of documents about model governance. It's pretty good. We see model, governance, data, AI, fairness. These all seem like reasonable words. So it's it's a good assertion to the fact that it's responding appropriately. Same with verbs. We see include, ensure, ensuring, involving, address. These are all, again, expected words that we actually seem absolutely reasonable responses. So this not only allows us to examine that it's not responding with really weird words or things that don't seem to be contextually appropriate, but we're also capturing a baseline of the kinds of words it's responding with, so that we can, again, examine if there's any drift from that within the future. Another technique we utilize is what I call cross LLM querying. We basically use an LLM to examine the output of another LLM, in this case, comparison between Llama 2 and ChatGPT-4, to basically detect the truthiness of kind of what people are saying. So what we do is we actually take its answer, we break down that answer into constituent pieces, and then basically look at the truth or false ask the other LM to tell us the truth or falsehood of each of those individual statements, so that, again, we can kind of examine if there's a whole bunch of kind of falsehoods behind the assumptions of the answer, and get some baseline on that as well. So it kind of gives us in there, because you'll find if you read through all these, you'll find somewhere it actually does detect falsehoods in some of its assertions, which, if there's too many of those, can be concerning, or if they are particularly concerning in nature, like it's giving bad financial advice or something in your financial company, these are probably things you want to catch and address earlier than later. Additionally, we develop an accuracy score, again, using cross LLM querying, where we actually get an initial accuracy assertion. And again, I find if I actually ask it to break itself down, then reevaluate its response based on the original question, we find we get a much higher refined score that tends to be a lot more accurate. And how we do this is we actually take the answer from the LLM. We have a human reviewed factual answer. So it doesn't mean human generated, it just means somebody's looked at it and said, yes, this is a reasonably accurate statement. And we compare the two, break it down, why the two in comparison, and then develop a final score, so we can actually get a general accuracy score of the overall statement. So this gives us something somewhat quantitative we can go on to actually look overall at how accurate this LLM is. And then the final test we actually put together is the idea of Rails compliance. So basically, we want to validate that the Rail is in place and the Rail is functioning correctly. So we basically gave raw answers with ridiculous things of like a model has an approach that kills you or something, crazy stuff on there that should not be uttered out to the public on that kind of things, and ensure the fact that it actually gets filtered. So you'll see the fact that the Rail actually live filtered that component out, or if it was highly just completely inappropriate, it will completely kill the answer. And then we verify the fact that, yes, in fact, these answers were filtered correctly or not filtered correctly. So where the answer is wholly appropriate, we expect the answer to come back out as is. So this allows us to actually make sure the Rails are in place, the Rails are functioning, and the Rails are behaving as expected as well for this model. So we're actually able to do quite a bit of analysis around the models and get a lot of information in place on that. More importantly, we can actually then take that same information and automatically populate it within a Microsoft Word template for where somebody needs to actually go and fill out some rationale behind why they believe this model is appropriate or not. So we can pull information anywhere from our inventory, such as who developed the model or what the model is, to things like the prompt file analysis or the sentiment analysis or any of this kind of for the PII information, et cetera, we saw disclosed. And then the person can go in and actually fill in the human part of the models around here without having to spend time on this. So that way we fully taken the information and done this. And they said, these are Microsoft Word templates. They're just basically you go and you add some tags to the document, you register with our system, and then we can automatically populate it and pass it on and put it into these tickets, and then ultimately store the finalized document back with the model itself on there. So we have that kind of information available. So the person would do that part and actually mark that that process is complete. And now then we're going to have within the model the overall completed model document review, these test results, etc. So we'll have quite a bit of information available to us on that. In just a second, it'll continue on when it picks up the fact that the JIRA has been closed. And then we'll receive an actual approval request where we can go through and look at the model itself and see that there we go, and see the overall progress on this. 1 second. There we go. So now if we actually go look at the model snapshot that we're reviewing, we're building up that history. So we can see the tests that were run. We can see the review, the model review document was requested. We can see that that particular ticket that was driven under. We can see the status that it was done, that it's currently being reviewed. We can see even all the information back to, this is the model, this use case, this is what we're actually implementing. So we can get back to that. We can see all the submodels that are here and everything. So we're building up this robust inventory that includes all of this information. In the background here, I'm just going to close this ticket so it actually proceeds on here. And you know, this is a lot of information that's available because now you do have that test information, you have that back there, et cetera. So we do have this full picture of what is actually going on with the model on that. And just to give you an idea of the fact that we don't just kind of stop at the idea of the model, traditional model governance, we actually can move on to things like running Jenkins Veracode scan jobs, et cetera, as well on that, where we can kick out the, Jenkins job that will do a Veracode scan on the actual project. So you can see here where we've actually started a Jenkins job to then do a SecOps kind of thing. So we can jump into the traditional space as well, where we actually kind of can do the DevOps and fire those and integrate with those. The idea being, again, that overall ModelOp Center is that conductor of the orchestra where you can get all information about the model and shepherd it not only from basically the beginning of the use case, but all the way up to actually even a live deploy where we can put it in place, where we have the RESTful endpoints that they can communicate to, et cetera, as well. And we'll capture all that information in one location and have that there. So you can see where this Jenkins job is actually out running, and we'll associate it with the model. With that, I want to leave some time for overall questions that we can dive into specific about the implementations and what we've shown here today. So we're going to pause there because watching a model deploy is kind of dry and boring. So let's move on to some questions or anything people want us to dive further into.
And just a reminder, submit your questions in the Q&A box and we'll be sure to get those answered. But in the interim, I think, Jay, you're going to wrap up here quickly, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion.
We've just covered a lot of stuff, and I know it can kind of be overwhelming, and that's probably one of the reasons you're here. You're dealing, I mean, one, you're probably curious about, you're already familiar with ModelOp and you want to know what's in 3.2, or you're maybe kind of new to AI governance. You're trying to figure out the right approach, get some guidance, because there is so much you're dealing with. You know, we're hearing from the market, you know, corporate boards are very, very focused on trying to figure out use cases around customer service or other chatbots and how to deploy generative AI for a competitive advantage. On the flip side, team leads or executives are trying to figure out how to deal with the brand, the financial and the regulatory risks that can come with deploying the new technology. And then at the same time, anybody with a credit card can go in and use a third-party model and expose PII risks or other information from your company into that third-party model, which can cause various issues. So there's a lot to deal with. On top of that, there's a lot of regulations that are in development or are already out there today. So how do you kind of deal with all of that? And governance can feel like a really big word and a lot to tackle, but it really doesn't have to be. So coming out of this meeting, we're obviously going to send you the recording and the deck here, but we would encourage you to set up a demo on your own. I know it's often hard to ask questions to the big group here. So we'd love to do a separate meeting or a private demo as you can get your stakeholders together, so you can have a more intimate conversation and explore some of the things that are most critical to your business. So we'd love to set up a private demo with each one of you. On top of that, more broadly getting started, governance doesn't have to be a massive project. It can very much start with like a single use case. And that's why we have our Jumpstart program. It's a 90-day pilot. It works with your environment, and it can support the models that you already have in production or are planning to have in production. And we make it really easy to start because we break down the pilot into two things. We break it into a functional assessment and a technical assessment. And we have this functional setup really already set up with a bunch of templates in an environment that ModelOp has. So you can use the templates and the out-of-the-box processes that you need to quickly see if ModelOp can help meet your AI governance needs. And then there's a technical component where we install it in your environment. You can do all the configurations to your integrations to your system, because again, I want to repeat, ModelOp is not a SaaS platform. It is installed in your environment. So that is something obviously that you want to be able to do and assess. So we offer both those things to get you started really quickly and then customize it to your environment. So we really encourage a pilot program to help you get started quickly and really focus on your primary use cases. And then you can scale with it. We're enterprise grade, so you can scale up with your business. So with that, that's kind of the conclusion. And now I know we've got one question, Dave, one from Junan. I think you'll be able to answer this one. The question is, do you have an upstream dependency or recommended approach on how the document content is stored, whether it's small snippets versus large chunks, for optimal MLOps governance, processing, and assessment?
Yeah, I'll just start and I'll let Jim chime in as well. So, hey, thanks, Junan. It's great seeing you. So to answer that question, so we actually are agnostic to where the data is stored, and the data is inclusive of documents themselves. So whether you have a document store, whether that's a Pinecone or other type of document-based database that you want to actually store, not only the documents, but also the embeddings that they have, we're agnostic to that. Obviously, in the demonstration, Jim used one version of those, which was Weaviate, but again, we're agnostic to where those are stored. I'll let Jim answer some of the optimization questions as it relates to some of the document processing.
Yeah, for the document processing, I said we don't drive that process in particular. What we do though is part of recommended practices for the inventories, we will store the ingest code itself. So that way we have record of how they were actually chunked and how they were actually ingested. Document chunking is a little bit of a black art, to be honest, in exactly what works well. When we were playing with the model governance documents, for instance, larger chunking sizes were required because, let's see, government documents tend to be a bit wordy. So if we captured small snippets, we didn't capture much context. But you may have other more scientific nature documents that may be more precise in nature and shorter in nature, and actually should be chunked less. And that's part of the experimentation phase. And there's a whole bunch of tools starting to evolve that help with that process. But we view that similarly as to model experimentation, where you kind of play around with it and do it. What we do is track the references to it, the ingest code that's ultimately used, and we'd expect that also ultimately to end up in some of the model review documentation as to the chunking strategy that was used for this kind of a process, if that makes sense.
Yep, perfect, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to read the next one, Jay, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, I got it right here. So yeah, we got a couple other ones. People kind of hit me up on the side here with a few different questions. So the next one is, do you support LLM models that we might buy as opposed to just building? So do you have stuff that's out of the box, I guess, is the question.
Quick answer is yes, absolutely. So obviously all enterprises are considering buying or using existing LLMs, but that's just in general. We just treat, as Jim mentioned at the beginning, LLMs just another type of model. So we support all vendor third-party purchase model, regardless of an LLM or if it's a fraud-based model. Absolutely, those are supported within ModelOp Center from an inventory and process control. It's treated exactly the same, but obviously we don't have access to the code that's behind them. But otherwise, it's treated the same from a governance perspective.
Yeah, and I do want to add on there that there's multiple approaches for that. So we actually kind of showed two. I mean, we didn't buy it, we used one for free. But so ChatGPT-4, that's an example of an actual vendor endpoint model where we're not even hosting it or running it. Obviously, I'm not running ChatGPT-4 on my little computer here. So, that was the example of a vendor hosted model. We also have the Llama 2, which, again, it was free download. But again, I consider that a vendor model because I don't know what went into it. We just are using it. We're hosting it internally, but it's still a binary that is actually still a vendor model, and the fact that it's an opaque binary to us that we may not know much about. And obviously those can then be further reinforced, learned, or whatever else as well, and handled that way as well. So we support all of those kinds of models fully.
Nice. So there are a couple more, or one more here. So the question is, if we have an existing library of functions to test or to monitor, how would that work? How do we test and monitor our existing libraries?
Yeah, so I think Jim alluded to this earlier as well, that we have a set of out-of-the-box tests that can be used for upfront testing, ongoing monitoring, but you can absolutely always upload your existing library because we know you've made investments around specific metrics that you want to see, regardless of the type of model. Again, those can be uploaded into ModelOp Center. They get tied into that same automation framework that helps to automatically run the test, to run them against thresholds and produce documentation. So it's actually a very common pattern. The majority of our customers actually use that paradigm of using some of our out-of-the-box tests and some of their custom ones as well.
Cool. Awesome. And there's one thing I do want to just kind of show. I know this wasn't part of the initial presentation, but a lot of times we get the question of like, do you work with these tools? Do you work with these integrations? And so this is a slide we often show customers or prospects to help them see where what kind of ModelOp sits. And Jim mentioned this during the demo. We are not replacing your existing investments. We work with the tools and investments you already have. So that we can help provide an enterprise-wide single source of truth for inventory controls and reporting. Obviously there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different platforms within your environment already, and ModelOp works with them. And Jim, Dave, I don't know if there's any kind of final thought or comment you want to put on that, but that's why I just wanted to reinforce that, because I know that that's a big question we get a lot.
Yeah, it's a question that really, as Jay mentioned, gets asked a lot. Is saying, well, these models, they touch a lot of different systems, a lot of different processes, and a lot of different people get involved, right? And so that's where many time early conversations we had, they say, oh my gosh, this is going to be a multi-year effort to just get going with this. But that's where we, over the past several years, again, a third version of our software, we spent a deal of investment in having these out-of-the-box integrations to make it seamless so that we can actually go from what would traditionally be a re-platform, a multi-year enterprise effort to get something like this involved to, as Jay mentioned, a 60 to 90-day type effort. So again, these out-of-the-box integrations are an area that has helped to streamline really the usage and onboarding of the software.
Awesome. Well, are there any more questions? I think we're kind of getting towards the end here.
Jay, looks like one more came in, Jay.
Just got one more. Let me just take a look. Give me 1 second here. Dave. All right. We got one right here. Do LLMs need to be trained in order for custom usage? And Jim, I think I'll send that over to you.
Sure, no problem. That's something we often hear from people is like, well, how do you train LLMs, et cetera, to use them in your business and et cetera. And that's one area that's interesting in that you don't actually necessarily need to train an LLM if you're using it in a lang chain type pattern. But let's talk first about why you might want to train an LLM. Well, if you basically take something like ChatGPT-4 or Llama 2 or whatever, it's trained across very broad language that can be used, it's natural language as people would just conversationally talk. Obviously a lot of it's coming from the internet on that kind of things, but it's going to answer in a very generic way. Where reinforcement learning may come in handy and can be used is if you want that natural language to be domain specific. So if I want to sound it very technical or very medical or very, something specific, or even colloquial perhaps, for be very region specific, that's where you would actually need to train the LLM. What we're seeing as a larger use case within the enterprise, however, though, is where you use a traditional LLM as it's already trained just to handle natural language, but instead, like in our demo today, you make it query against the known set of documents and only create responses out of those documents stored in a vector database. So that way you can make it domain specific to your environment without retraining the LLM, which is very expensive to do and very laborious, and still make it very, very applicable to your uses, such as we're seeing things like people setting up chatbots against HR documents or like the model governance documents or policy documents or those kinds of things. So in those cases, you're probably not going to need to retrain the LLM. You can use it as is because it's only acting as literally the language processor. Your knowledge domain is stored within that vector database. So no, you don't. Very often for most business use cases, that pattern is probably going to be the predominant one where you're basically using it against your vector database and using that as the domain knowledge source. But you may find very things where you want it to behave in a very specific mannerisms. And in those cases, that's where you might consider reinforcement learning. So.
Got it. Well, it seems like people are more comfortable just privately chatting me. So I got a couple more questions here, or one more question here. So, kind of regulations are evolving, but how do you guys stay current on the requirements and the controls or the gates needed to be implemented to support or comply with those regulations or oversights? Dave, that's probably one for you to answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. So ModelOp, as being an AI governance and model governance company as a whole, we are constantly keeping up to date with the latest regulations, whether it's EU AI Act, whether it's Colorado AI Act, whether it's E23 extensions out of OSCE extensions out of Canada. So we're constantly keeping up with those, and then we're baking those types of guidelines that are generally put out by those regulations into our out-of-the-box capabilities. Jim showed you an example today, SR 11.7. That's from the OCC out of the US. That it gives guidelines around best practices for model risk and governance. Those types of regulations are baked into the out-of-the-box model life cycles or workflows as we showed today. But the beautiful thing is that you can actually tailor those workflows to your specific governance policy. At the end of the day, most of the regulations are guidelines, right? They give you, well, again, practical guidelines, but then you have to go and implement those based on your business. And that's where ModelOp Center provides a drag and drop interface for you to tweak those workflows, to provide custom tests and metrics and document templates based on your specific governance policy. So this gives you really the assurance that you're future-proof, not only in what's coming from the regulations, which will be baked into the product, but also how you guys change, how your enterprise changes governance policies and procedures as you go. That's a great question. And if you'd ever want to talk about regulations, feel free to reach out to me. I've got a stack of them sitting over here on my desk.
Awesome. Well, we're almost at time, so I think we're going to call it here. I want to thank everybody for joining. And again, we'd love to set up a demo or a follow-up meeting with you to really kind of dive into some more specifics because there is so much to cover. And we just want to remind you, like, governance doesn't have to be a massive, scary word. There's really quick ways to get started. Our Jumpstart pilot program is a great way to do that. I encourage you to visit the website, and we're going to be following up this meeting with this deck, the recording, and some other pieces of material that will help you get started with AI governance. So thanks for joining, everybody. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.